Hi everybody, thanks for joining me again for another video. This is Peter, Thailand bound, and today's subject matter for today's video is, once again, we're going to be doing a relationship video. That is a relationship that's taking place between a Western man, and in this case it's an English guy, and a bar girl. For the sake of this story, we'll change the names. I never use real names, so we're going to be calling the guy in the story, we're going to be calling him David, and the Thai bar girl, we're going to be calling her Dao for this story. This story starts off in Pattaya, away from Walking Street. As always, when I tell these kind of stories, I've got to give you a little bit of background on the couple involved so you know how they came to meet. And in this particular story, you don't really need to know too much about Dao, because her story is pretty much the same as most bar girls, but we will touch on it just so you know her individual case. I will tell you a lot more about David and how he came to end up meeting Dao. So we'll begin with him and his background. So David wasn't an old guy. He was only about 32, 33. He had a small apartment above a shop. He'd bought it. He had a mortgage on it. Wasn't a huge mortgage. He'd managed to save quite a bit. He was single, as I say. He was about 35 at the time, 33 maybe. He'd never really he'd had one or two serious girlfriends, but they'd never sort of worked out for whatever reason. And at this time he was on his own. He was quite popular with his workmates. He was a nice guy, simple kind of guy. When I say simple, I don't mean he was stupid. He was just one of those guys you kind of took to him. If you met him, you didn't think anything bad or anything good. He was just a nice guy. Now, David and a friend decided that they wanted to take a holiday together. They hadn't done any research as such. They just decided they wanted to go to a hot country. It could have been Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia. They weren't fussed. But for whatever reason, they decided that they were going to go to Thailand, him and his friend, just one guy, so the two of them. And what they decided to do, they decided to stay a night in Bangkok, and then they would head down to Pattaya. The reason they were going down to Pattaya, just because they'd done very, very little research, and they knew that Pattaya wasn't too far from Bangkok, a couple of hours in a taxi, and they wanted to sort of hang around a beach town. They were going to take quite a long time off, about 3 weeks each. It was a yearly holiday, and they'd managed to hook it up around the same time. The hotel that they'd actually chosen was on Soi 8. To anybody who hasn't been to Pattaya, Soi 8 is kind of towards the other end of the beach. It's not really where all the action is. You've got Walking Street, that end of Pattaya Beach Road, but they were kind of up the other way. And they were staying, as you walk into Soi 8, there's a hotel on the left, and it's called the Eastern Inn. It's got a little convenience store on the corner, and they stayed there. It's a budget hotel. Although David and his friend weren't really sort of party people, they weren't really big drinkers, you can't miss it. If you come out of your hotel, or if you come out of the Eastern Inn on Soi 8, it's just bar after bar after bar. There must be 300 to 500 girls working them bars, and you can cut through, and round the corner you're in Soi 7, same sort of thing. A lot of bars around there. And I believe they have an English pub around there. I can't remember if it's Soi 6 or Soi 7. Pig and Whistle, I think it's called. I've been in there a few times, but haven't been to Pattaya for a while. So in the evening, they decided they'd go out and have a bit of fun and see what it's all about. And as I say, they didn't really have too much experience with the girls, but they were both single, and they thought, let's go out, have a few drinks and see what it's all about. And they were newbies, so really wet behind the ears, anything could happen. Now, when they went out, the first bar they went in, they weren't very adventurous guys. I mean, they came out the front door of the Eastern Inn, and there's a bar literally right in front of the Eastern Inn there, and they sat and had a drink in there. And Mark is David's friend. Mark got chatting to a girl at that bar, decided to talk to her, and David was getting a little bit bored. Mark bought her a couple of drinks. Don't forget, this is all new to them guys, so the fact that all new to these guys, so the fact that a young lady was speaking to him, he was very thrilled about that, and he didn't really want to pull himself away, ignoring the fact that it was 300 to 500 girls up the street. But anyway, he was talking to this guy. He bought her a couple of drinks. David said to him, he said, look, I'll tell you what, I'll come back down. You know, I'm getting a bit bored in this bar. I'm going to walk up the street and see what else is about. David walked up the street. He stopped in one of the bars along the way, had a drink, moved on to another one. And eventually he got up to there's a cluster of bars. As you walk up Soy 8, you pass the Eastern Inn on the left, and then there's a cluster of bars on your right. I think there's 4 or 5, maybe even 6 bars. The noise is deafening at night. They all compete to have the loudest music, absolutely full of girls. And he ended up at the bar in one of these cluster bars. I don't know the name of the bar, but David ended up in one of these bars. He got himself a drink, a beer. Wasn't a spirit drinker, and he ended up playing one of these games, Connect Four, one of the girls, and the girl just happened to be Dal, which he didn't know at the time. So a little bit of background on Dal. Typical working girl in Pattaya, came from Isan. I don't know exactly which town she came from, probably somewhere around Konkan, Udantani, something like that. She'd come down to Pattaya a few years before. She'd been married, usual story, drunk husband, got a bit violent when he was drunk. She had to get away. She had a kid up in Isan, maybe 2, I don't know. But she came down to Pattaya, she was working. She wasn't she wasn't a rock star. And what I mean by she wasn't a rock star, she was about 30, so she'd had a child, so she couldn't really put on a bikini and jump on a in a go-go bar like the younger girls do. And that's what I mean by a rock star, these real stunners who are quite young and they're working in these top go-go bars in Walking Street. That's basically the background on her. There's nothing really more to tell. I mean, it's she's a working girl, she's working in a beer bar, and she makes her money from drinks and going off with customers. So David, as I say, he's totally naive. He's never heard anything about. I mean, he's heard various bits and bobs about Thailand, but nothing Pacific. He doesn't. He takes everything at face value. As I say, he's not stupid, but anything he's told, he's got no reason to disbelieve it. And he struck up a conversation with Dal. They were playing Connect Four. He bought her a few drinks, and as it happened, he quite enjoyed himself. And he wasn't particularly thinking to himself he was going to take a girl back to the hotel. He wasn't thinking he had to go around and talk to 20 girls. He was just happy talking to Dal. And eventually, his friend David, he wandered up and joined him. And David got speaking to another girl in the same bar. So they ended up in the same bar, and to cut a long story short, David basically spent most of the evening with Dal playing these games, buying her drinks, and of course Dal was really happy. She was with this guy who didn't know the score, and he'd bought her something like 6, 7, 8 drinks or something like that, not knowing the system in Thailand that if you buy a lady's drink, then obviously she gets a commission off that drink. I think back then it was 45, 50 baht. So if he bought her 7 or 8 drinks, then obviously that's quite a nice little bit of earnings for her. He didn't know anything other than that. As I say, he was quite a bit wet behind the ears. He didn't know the system, how it works. And basically, he was prepared to listen to Dal and believe anything that Dal told him, which was great for Dal. So let's cut to the chase and get to the end of that night. So we're getting on for just after midnight. As I say, David, he wasn't going to be out till 4 or 5 in the morning. He wasn't that sort of person. But during the conversation, Dal had worked her magic a little bit. They're very clever, these girls, guys, and they can suss you out quite quickly. And she'd discovered that David was a newbie. He was pretty much willing to listen to anything, and she figured if she played her cards right, she was onto a winner here, and she was. So what happened was Dal persuaded David to meet up with her the next day on the pretense that she was going to show him around Pattaya. She had a little motorbike. She was going to pick him up at his hotel on Soy 8, Eastern Inn there. She had a spare helmet. She was going to take him around Pattaya, take him for lunch. She wouldn't be paying though. How surprise, surprise. But she was going to show him a few of the sights of Pattaya, and he agreed and went back to his hotel, chuffed. And he said to his friend, he said, I'm onto a winner here. I've met a real nice girl. She's lovely, and she's going to pick me up tomorrow on her motorbike. She's going to take me out. So of course David thinks he's won the jackpot. He's not thinking about anything else. So tomorrow comes, and good to a word, Dal turns up at the hotel quite early, about 11:30 I think it was, picked up David. They went around Pattaya for the day. They had lunch. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty and bore you with all the details, but the sort of thing you do around Pattaya. Dal excused herself at the end of the day. David thanked her. He'd had a real nice time. Dal said, that's fine. Just make sure you come to my bar tonight because I want to see you. And, I think we're getting on quite well, which of course, David wasn't going anywhere else. Now, his friend was getting a bit cheesed off because he'd been left on his own. And David As we say, he'd hooked up with Dow again. He was going to her bar every night. He was buying her 7, 8, 9 drinks. Dow was loving it because basically she didn't have to put herself about. She didn't have to try and sell herself to get drinks. This guy was turning up at a bar, sitting down and playing games. He was believing everything that she came out of her mouth. And every time he bought a drink, he bought Dow a drink. And even if he wasn't buying a drink, she'd want another drink. He didn't think twice about it. He bought her another drink. So this went on for a week or so. They started meeting up more and more, and it got a little bit more serious. And eventually, I'll try and keep this as polite as I can. Eventually, David, he did manage to take Dal back to his hotel, and a relationship developed. And after that, they got very, very close. And I'm sure you know what I mean when I say a relationship developed. And for David, this was something else because he hadn't been with a lady in the UK for a long, long time. And he was now hooked on Dal. I wouldn't say he was in love with her, but he liked her a lot. So eventually David's holiday had to come to an end, and he found himself back in the taxi on the way to Bangkok and eventually back to the UK, where he went back to work. He looked back on his holiday, his vacation, and what he'd done, he'd actually arranged to keep in touch with Dal when he was back in the UK. He didn't really know what his future plans were going to be with Dal, but what he did think to himself was he didn't want to lose contact with her, because unfortunately for David, he didn't realize what it was all about in Thailand. And as far as he was concerned, what Dal had actually told him, she said that she told the truth up to a point. She said she'd come down from Isan. She was single, she had a child, she needed to make money. But where the story got a little bit dishonest was what she told David was that she was in her bar every night. Customers came in, they played games, they liked a bit of company with the girls. They'd buy her drinks, she'd make commission off the drinks, and she'd go home to her own room after that. She never ever went with a customer. That's what she sold David. David had no reason to disbelieve her. As far as he was concerned, she was sitting in the bar every night. People were buying her drinks. She was playing games, and that's how she made her money. But in reality, what she was doing, she was going with customers, and that's where she made her real money. But obviously, David didn't know anything about that. So when he was back in the UK, he decided, like, you know, as I say, he wanted to keep in touch with her, and he got a line or WhatsApp, something like that, and he'd contact her regular. Sometimes he couldn't get hold of her because obviously she'd gone off with a customer, but he wasn't suspicious at all. She could come back on and say, oh, I had to go and visit somebody, or I had a sick friend, and he just took it at face value, and yeah, fine, no problem. So the day came once again where David decided to go back to Thailand. I think about 3 or 4 months had gone by. The only thing is he couldn't up sticks when he wanted to, because obviously he was working for a big company. He got about 6 to 8 weeks holiday a year, but it all had to be booked, and he couldn't just go when he felt like it. So he had to book his vacation. And the next time he went, it was 3 or 4 months after he'd been out with his friend David. And this time he decided to go out on his own. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to fly to Bangkok. He was going to have one night on his own, straight down to Pattaya, and he was going to spend his entire vacation with Dal. And that's what he did. He basically spent, I think it was 2 weeks this time. Every night he went. She did actually say to him at one point, she did say, look, if you want me to not work and spend time with you, we can do that, but you do need to compensate the bar. He didn't know the score. He didn't know what it was all about. As far as he was concerned, the way his take on it was that he, you know, if somebody bought the lady a drink, let's just use a figure of 150 baht, might have been less. Then let's just say, for example, again, the bar got 100 baht of that drink and the girl got 50 baht. If she wasn't there and she would have got, let's just say, for example, she would have got 5 drinks, she was in the bar, that means the bar would have made 500 baht from her. Now, obviously, if she's not going to be in the bar, those 5 drinks aren't bought and the bar loses a 500. So what Dal has told David is, if you pay bar 500 baht, then I can come out with you. The bar are very happy because they've made their money. They get to keep the alcohol. They don't have to give that with when they buy the drinks, and I can spend the evening with you. And as I say, David took that on face value. He thought about it. He thought, yep, that makes sense. I'll do that. And he basically bar fined her for a few nights, and they didn't do anything spectacular. It was just David just loved the company. and Dal was just making the most of it. She got a few presents out of him. She took him to a shopping mall. I think she ended up getting a nice handbag, a few designer t-shirts, and like I say, David had plenty of money, and especially when he came on vacation, he brought quite a bit with him. He wasn't worried about that, and anything Dal said, he believed. He bought her presents, and he paid for everything. So Dal was really happy. She knew she was onto a winner, and David was happy as well. So let's just take a breather for a second here and just evaluate where we are in the story now. So we've got David and Dal together. David's visiting Dal for the second time in Pattaya. He's wet behind the ears. He doesn't know what's going on. But on the other side of the coin, he's very, very happy with the way the relationship's developed with Dal. She hasn't done anything to raise any suspicions. He hasn't seen her talking with other guys or leaving the bar with other guys. Nobody's told him anything about her. She appears to be a decent girl who just works in the bar for drinks, and he's very happy with her company. And as far as he's concerned, she's also beautiful on top of that, so that's a bonus. As far as Dal's concerned, David is a nice guy. She knows he's got a good job. She knows he's single. She knows he has his own apartment in the UK. And she also knows that if she plays it cool, nice and easy, slow, potentially she could reel herself in a husband, fairly young, handsome, and pretty well off. Not rich, obviously, but pretty well off. Good catch for a bar girl. And that's the situation as it plays out up to this point. David's gone back to the UK again. He comes back to Pattaya. He goes back to the UK. This goes on about half a dozen times. And eventually he does fall in love with Dal. And Dal now, because she knows David is seeing her very, very regularly. He's paying a lot of money out on airfares. He never sees another girl. She knows 100% she's the one. She's not taking any chances. If she sees a guy that she's been with before, she won't even say hello. Normally with the Thai girls, if a guy's with a Thai girl and she sees one of her other customers from last week who could potentially be another customer next week, she'll smile, say hello, and then she'll tell the guy she's with, oh, he's just a friend, or he knows my girlfriend, something like that. But because of the situation with David, she wasn't going to take even the smallest chance. So she ignored all the guys who she knew that she bumped into. There weren't no hellos, nothing. And she pretty well didn't take any chances. Now, at this time, David wanted to arrange to take Dal back to the UK to show what it was all about, just on a couple of weeks vacation. It was quite difficult even in those days. I'm talking about 15 years ago, 16 years ago. He wanted to get her a visa just to visit for a few weeks. He did manage to sort it out in the end, so we're not going to go into the nitty-gritty, as I say. I'll just explain what happened in a nutshell. So David arranged all this. He paid for all the visas. He paid for the airfare, everything like that. And he came to Thailand and he met Dal and he took her back on the flight. And eventually she goes back to Thailand. On this occasion, he does have to send her on her own. He drives her down to the airport, puts her on the flight, but he can't go at that time because he's committed to work. But she goes back. She's had a good time, lots of presents for her family and child and all this. And she heads back to Thailand. Now, David is really in love with her at this time, and he's decided that he's going to propose to her, and he's going to ask her, the next time he goes over there, he's going to ask her to marry him. As I say, unfortunately, he doesn't know the score as far as the bars, the go-go bars, what these girls do, anything like that. He's totally, totally naive. He's taken Dal on face value. He's done the right thing as far as he's concerned. In his mind, Dal loves him. He loves Dal. They should get married. She's going to be happy in the UK. He's going to be happy because he's got himself a new wife. Why not? Why wouldn't you do it? So that's what he's decided to do. Books himself several months later. Obviously, he's in touch all the time. Books another holiday to another vacation to Thailand. But in the meantime, he buys a real nice ring from a jewellery shop, something like £5,000, which is about 6,000 US dollars. Diamond in it. I don't know, carat, clarity, anything like that, but good ring. He heads back over to Thailand and he asks Dal to marry him, which obviously she starts crying because he asked her in the bar in front of the girls. Can you imagine in Soy 8 asking a girl to marry you? But anyway, he did, and obviously she accepted, and everybody was screaming and shouting, the drinks were flowing, and on that occasion, David had to go back on his own. But eventually, the day came. He married her in Thailand. It wasn't an official ceremony. It was more of a I don't know how you describe it. It was a marriage, but it wasn't kind of official. But the official one was taking place in the UK. So Dal came back to the UK. They did get married. It was a real simple ceremony. It was in a registry office, not a church. There was one witness. I think it was David's brother. A very small ceremony. They decided that they weren't going to go on an expensive honeymoon abroad, because obviously Dal's just come from abroad. David's been going to Thailand for God knows how long now, lots and lots of trips. What they decided to do, David decided he was going to take 2 or 3 weeks off work, and they would just spend the time together, relax and get to know each other even more. And that's what they did. So they were now married. They're now living in David's apartment, and eventually the honeymoon comes to the end. David goes back to work, and as far as David's concerned, everything's good. You know, he's got Dal. She's now married. They got the visa. She can stay as long as she wants. From his side, it's all good. He's got a good job. He's paying everything for her. Obviously, she has to send money back to her family. I think in the end, the figure they came up with was about 15,000 baht a month. So what Dal had said is, look, if I leave the bar, you know, obviously I'm coming to marry you. I won't be working. I can't just abandon my family and let them starve. You know, you'll have to help me. And this was kind of worked out before the wedding, and, you know, before they decided they were going to be an item, because obviously she needed peace of mind. She couldn't go to the UK and just abandon her family. And that's what David agreed. He did a 12 or 15,000, but he set up a direct debit that went up to her village. And so Dal was pretty happy. Her family were looked after in that way. So Dal wasn't working. You know, in the UK, a man will go to work, the lady stays at home. She's got her friend, she'll clean the house, she'll go shopping, she might have children that she looks after. This wasn't the case with Dal. She was in a foreign country. She didn't know anybody. She didn't really speak the language well. She was on her own. The only contact she had as far as human contact was David. So when David left the apartment in the morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning, that was it. She was on her own all day. For about a month, it wasn't too bad, because she went out and she wandered around the town centre. It was quite interesting for her. She was in England and she was in an aura, as it were. She was looking around thinking, wow, I'm in the UK, you know, Thai girl on her own looking around. So, but one thing that did come as a bit of a surprise to Dal, and it was a very pleasant surprise, she was getting a lot of attention from the guys. And this is something she hadn't experienced since her youth, since she was about sort of 17, 18, maybe 20. But when she was out and about on her own, she was getting a lot of attention. Van drivers were slowing down and winking at her. They were beeping their horn. You know, she'd be walking through the town centre, guys would be crooking their neck, twisting to look at her. They'd smile at her. You know, they thought she was Chinese sometimes, and they'd try and say hello in Chinese. But she was getting a lot of attention and she liked it. And that's, I mean, the simple reason for that is, guys, I mean, in the UK, I mean, why do you think everybody goes to Thailand? I mean, you've got about as much chance as hooking up with a girl in the UK as if you have as, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but that's why basically everybody goes to Thailand. So she was getting all this attention and she loved it. So she's been there. Dal's been in the UK for about 2 months now, I would imagine. She's getting very, very bored. She's getting very, very lonely. She's always on her phone talking to the girls online. What you got to remember, guys, the two different environments. I mean, look, picture it, Pattaya. So think about Dal's day. She'll wake up, she'll probably share a room with half a dozen girls or an apartment. So she's surrounded by girls. They're all speaking her language. They go to the bar, they'll clean the bar, tidy the bar, do a bit of washing, whatever, but they're doing it as a group and they're gossiping all the way. They're talking about last night's guys, who's going to come in tonight. And then they'll order food from the cart. Somebody will go out and get a load of food. They'll sit round one of the concrete tables of the bar and they'll eat the food. They'll all put their makeup on. They're still gossiping. They're sitting around the bar with their little mirrors. You know, and it's like a chicken coop. You know, they're all squawking. Eventually the bar opens and then it's radar time. You know, they're seeing who they can focus in on. And so they're always with people. At the end of the night, they're either going to go off with a guy or they're going to be talking with one of their friends. And then they do exactly the same the next day. So you imagine you're in that environment as a Thai girl. All of a sudden you're in an apartment. You only know your husband. He's gone to work. And you've now got the next 8 to 12 hours alone. Nobody to talk to. You don't know anybody. You're isolated. So what are you going to do? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to get online. You're going to get on WhatsApp. You're going to start trying to contact your friends in Thailand. In the UK, there's a 6 to 7 hour time difference, depending on what time region we're in. In the winter, obviously, the clock's on a different setting to the summer by 1 hour. So in the winter, you'll set the 7 hours difference. So when she wants to talk to her friends in the afternoon in Thailand, she's going to have to get up quite early in the morning. Maybe she's not in the mood. So, I mean, I'm waffling on a bit, guys, but I'm just trying to set the scene. She was actually lonely now. She'd been there 2 months. She was lonely. Um, Now, another thing you've got to understand about the Thai girls, the bar girls I'm talking about now, as far as income concerns goes, money, it doesn't matter what they earn. It's never enough. If there's an opportunity to earn more, they will go out and get it. So Dal living in the UK, she was getting a lot of attention, and eventually the day came when somebody did approach her and asked her where she came from, what you doing. Oh, I've been there on holiday. Let's have a cup of coffee together. One thing led to the other. She told the guy that she'd met in the town that I'm married. My husband's not very nice to me. I don't know why. She just lied. She said, I'm living with this guy. He brought me from Thailand. Doesn't give me any money. Blah, 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 blah. To cut a long story short, she kind of insinuated she was desperate for money for her family. David had promised to give her money. He hadn't given her, which is all totally false. David was looking after her real nice, and she could have had a nice life with him. But the guy she'd met in town, she'd falsified this story and said, look, I'm short of cash, explain. And because the guy had been to Thailand before, he knew the score as well. So he was kind of in a mindset of like, oh, something could work out here. She's Thai. One thing led to the other. And yeah, you've probably guessed by now what happened was he offered in a roundabout way to give her money to send back to her family. But of course, he'd want something back in return. And Dao, being a professional, no problem at all. Off she went with this guy, and she made, I think it was about £100 with him. So £100, you're looking at around 4,000 baht. Good money. Of course, obviously, when it was all done and dusted, back to the apartment, David come home from work. He didn't know anything. He didn't suspect anything. He wouldn't have suspected anything, but what had happened is Dal now realised, she thought about this and she thought, hang on a minute, I'm now in a position, okay, I've got David, but I can tell him whatever I want to know. He'll believe it. He's not suspicious of me. It's not like the guys who come into my bar in Thailand. I can do pretty much what I want. And as long as I'm not blatant about it, I'm going to get away with it. I've been with someone for an hour and I've just made 4,000 baht. Fantastic. She met this guy again, and on several occasions, she'd meet him in town and he had a friend with him, and she'd get talking to his friend. Well, I'm not going to go through all the nitty gritty. What happened was she'd go with a friend and another friend and another friend. Before long, the whole town knew, everybody, as always happens, everybody knew except her husband David, that there was this Thai girl available, and if you did it in the right way and you slipped her £100, 4,000 baht, you could pretty much have a nice afternoon or a nice early evening, maybe a morning session, something like that. And it's sad, really, because David had done the right thing. Dao being Dao. As I've always said in the videos, there's an old saying in Thailand, it's absolutely true. And that saying is, you can take the girls out of the bar, but you can't take the bar out of the girl. And that's what's happened. She's got that mentality. She sees an opportunity to make money. She ignores the fact that she's actually married. David's a great guy, totally honest, looking after her. She ignores that. She just sees pounds, dollars, baht in front of her. And if she's got a chance to make it, she will do. And what happened is she ended up going everywhere. Guys, it doesn't take long in a small town to realise, there's a pretty girl who's available for a price. And she was everywhere. She was putting herself about. So after about 6 months, the inevitable happened. David, as naive as he was with a friend. And his friend, being a real friend, didn't want to upset David. But on the other hand, he didn't want David to be treated as a doormat. Turned round to David one day and said, how's Dal getting on in the UK? What does she do all day? She doesn't work. Are you sure she's staying at home all day? He basically put a load of hints down, and David ended up following her one day with a friend, and he pretty much found out what went on. I could drag this out a bit more. I'm not going to. I'll just tell you the conclusion to this story. What happened is, as naive as David had been in Thailand, he wasn't going to put up with it. He's a decent guy. He'd provided everything for Dao. She'd gone to the UK and prostituted herself. He wasn't going to put up with it. He basically went back to his apartment. He packed her bags. She didn't know anything. She turned up. He said, "You're out." She she tried to play dumb. She didn't know anything about it, but of course, you know, it was too late by then. And so on this particular day, David threw out the apartment, absolutely gutted, heartbroken, shattered. I mean, don't forget, guys, Dal was his wife now. He was in love with her. As far as he was concerned, he had a wife and everything was good. The last thing he expected, his wife would turn out to be a prostitute, which she did. She had been already, but obviously he didn't know. So how does it end? What happened was Dal did leave. She had no choice. David carried on as he had been before he went to Thailand, utterly devastated. He became a bit of a recluse for about a year. He was almost suicidal, but he didn't go that far. At least he had his job in his apartment. He got over it eventually. What happened with Dal? Same as always happens. She hooked up with one of these low lifes who she'd been hanging around with in town, moved in with him, stayed with him for a few months, did the same to him. And then, you know, it's like a daisy chain. It goes round until it comes to the end when nobody will take her in. She's then got the choice of hooking up with other Thai girls in the area and going full on. Normally they have a room above a little Thai restaurant or something like that. But in this case, Dal went back to Thailand. Where is she now? I think she's back in Soi 8. I have heard that Dal's back in Soi 8. And that's it, basically. That was the relationship between Dal and David. It didn't work out. Surprise, surprise. It normally doesn't. But that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Let it be a warning to you if you've never been there before and you're thinking of hooking up with somebody seriously. There are most Thai girls in Thailand obviously are decent. They're very, very respectable. If you want to meet a Thai girl to have as a wife, go to an agency. You'll find that the girls are totally different to the bar girls. They don't speak English most of the time. They're a little bit more simple in the way they think, but they're very respectful girls, as is most Thai girls are very, very decent, respectable girls. Guys get the wrong idea because they hit the bars when they get to Thailand. That's a very, very small percentage of Thai girls. There's a lot of nice girls in Thailand. If you were looking for a wife, then I would suggest an agency. I did make a video called Thai Dating Agencies, My Thoughts, and maybe you can go back and have a look at that one. But that's it for today, guys. That's the relationship story. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching this one.